Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Unlock Your Inner Creator series. I'm Noilyn Mendoza, the host, and I'm super excited to have our next guest, Dr. Jason Yuan. But first of all, I have just been in this mode because my kids just started school again. And if you're a parent like me, it's all about getting back into a routine, a new schedule. And I feel like in some ways, the new school year is another new year, is a reset for many of us. And I want to call in that energy around resetting and starting anew into this conversation. So with that being said, I wanted to introduce Dr. Jason Yuan. He is a licensed naturopathic physician and acupuncturist practicing in the tri-state area. So Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. He has a passion for holistic health, which emerged from his own personal experience of having a chronic illness for over 20 years. He saw the gap in the traditional healthcare model and pursued alternative approaches, such as traditional Chinese medicine and naturopathic medicine. Dr. Yuan strives to personalize his treatments for each of his patients' specific needs through an integrative approach. Combined with his honesty, motivation, and compassion, Dr. Yuan emphasizes that he strives to be the model doctor that everyone would like to have. So amazing. So welcome, Jason. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Noilyn. I am impressed that I even wrote that. It's been a while since someone has read that bio that well, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, you're super impressive. So all the accolades are well deserving. Jason and I just met actually the last few months, and we've had an opportunity because we have mutual connections to really get to know each other. One thing that Jason didn't mention, he also has his own podcast, which is the Pranic Healing Podcast. So make sure to tune into that to hear all about energy medicine and how it's just been an amazing thing in so many people's lives. So with that being said, Jason, did you want to add anything else?
Besides being a pranic healer and also practicing our Hatha yoga, which we met through mutual friends and colleagues there, I think that sums it up all.
Awesome. So one thing that I always like to do to center my conversation and also to center our guests, I always like to call in who has influenced you in your life, or who do you want to call into this conversation today?
Yeah, that's an easy answer for me. The person that I strive to be and model is, of course, the founder of Pranic Healing and who I consider as my spiritual teacher, Master Choa Koksui. He's been such a amazing influence in my life. So having his presence here and always is always a goal of mine.
Call in Master Choa here, and it leads me to a good segue. I am very curious because you had mentioned in your bio that you have suffered from a chronic illness. Kind of walk us through this. And I'm also just interested in hearing about your path. How did you end up here? How did you end up, using so many amazing modalities to heal yourself in this mission that you have to really use that to be a model doctor?
Well, thank you, Noilyn, for that amazing question. I don't think anyone's asked it that way, but I think, my path to becoming who I am today has been nothing short of a miracle in design, I would say. I've never really wanted to be who I am now when you asked me when I was young, but really, again, it was through childhood chronic diseases, which I had, which was eczema, allergies, and asthma. We call that the atopic triad. So which basically means it's very common for kids to develop that at an early age. And for mine, it was more on the severe end. That means I went through conventional healthcare. And at that time, I was basically put on many different types of drugs and antibiotics, which really didn't treat the root cause, Noilyn. So it made things temporarily better. But again, in the long term, my body struggled. And in that struggle, as we know with any hero's journey, you have to look within yourself and find other options and approaches, which thankfully for my family, they're Chinese. So I got exposure to traditional Chinese medicine and learned what that was about. And then I got exposed to meditation and eventually got exposed to pranic healing. And, that's what inspired me to go on this path of being more of a holistic health practitioner, was seeing that there are so many more ways to define medicine besides drugs. That was again, I call it a miracle because I really didn't want this, but now hindsight's 2020. I think that there was no other way for me to be here right now. And for myself, if I were to do it all over again, I would pick the same way. I would choose to be who I am right now. And it's kind of funny how the universe works, right? Because it was never in my mind to do any of this. So again, part of my passion right now is to help other people, educate them on holistic health approaches like energy medicine, like herbs, like diet, nutrition, things like that to really support their health.
Yeah, Jason, this is super fascinating to me because I've had a lot of guests on this podcast, and most of the time it's a buried dream that's in them that they cultivated. But you went on something completely different. This is something that you would have never imagined your younger self to do. So there's something special about that. What was it that was in you that said, I'm going to be open and answer this call?
Yeah, I think that that's a question that all of us have within inside of ourselves. And really for me, I feel like the best analogy I can give you, Noilyn, is I feel like I was a bowling ball going down the bowling lane and the universe put guardrails on the side so I wouldn't go into the gutter. But really, I would say my sense of calling wasn't really strong until I graduated after becoming a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist. That's when I really felt my calling. I had interests in pursuing this path, right? I knew that there was something, I didn't want to follow conventional medicine. I wanted to do something health related. And I stumbled upon naturopathic medicine and acupuncture. So, of course, I chose to go into that, not being 100% like committed. I was like, okay, maybe we'll try this out, see how this works. But with like the universe, I feel like I was a bowling ball bouncing between the two guardrails. And eventually, with time, and I would say only the past few years since I've graduated, that I've really cultivated that sense of calling. I guess this is why I'm here and where I need to be. And part of that calling, like you mentioned, is, I have my own podcast and I really just try to talk about the science of energy medicine and make it less woo woo, but more grounded, more practical. And I feel like that is my calling so far. And I've been trying to do that in, different ways, how I can support the organization and of course, Master Cho's work.
Yeah. Something that I'm actually really receiving from you right now is to be open and not to be so rigid, right? Like what our path is, because I believe that some of us have this idea of what we think our life should be like, and we can be so tight with it. But in your example, it's almost like I'm going to be open and I don't know what this is. And I love the bowling ball analogy, but it's led you to here, which is probably something that you would have never imagined.
Never, never. And you know what they say, right? Going with the flow. I was going with the flow, Norland, but I was holding on to the guardrails or the safety rails like a roller coaster because it's been quite the journey. But as with anyone is, and I always reference the hero's journey because I feel like you mentioned, to that call to adventure, right? To do something different, to do something you're passionate about and you feel like this is your purpose. I find that I've been lucky because it's, again, not something that I chose, but now looking back, it's like, oh yeah, I would do this again. Yeah.
Yeah. What's been the most surprising part of this whole evolution of who you are?
Wow, that's a big question. The most surprising, I think the most surprising part is really understanding who I am as a person. I think that when you study health, when you study the mind, when you study the body, there's so many textbook ways of defining yourself, right? For me, I'm like, I have this profession, I have this title, I study the human body, I study, all these different metrics for health and blood tests and stool samples and other things like that. But really, what I've found most surprising, Nolan, is understanding that I'm not this physical body. I'm not these emotions. I'm not these lab markers. I am the inner state, the spiritual being that is resonating out of this human body. And I find that it's been such a journey because part of what I find to be in my hero's journey in coming to the calling is to really understand myself from authentic state. And when I mentioned the bowling ball analogy, I was really struggling to find my authentic self, right? I was really questioning, like, hey, is this really worth it? Is this what I want to do, right? Even though I was, you know, it worked out now, but I had my plenty of doubts and I wanted to quit several times. But I really understood trusting the process and letting yourself let go into your own inner state of being and finding that space of peace and compassion within yourself and knowing that whatever happens, it will happen for a good reason. I think that's the most surprising part because I was a very type A anxious, has to be in control, right? Has to know what's going to happen or else I won't do it. And now I'm starting to let go of that. And really, your best work comes from a state of no resistance. So basically, what I'm trying to do is how can I do this project? How can I send this email with the least amount of control or resistance? And usually, when I try to do that, it's like magic happens. It's like, oh, I get some inspiration and something comes in, and I'm able to do it so much easier than I could have just hard working it out.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think this idea of letting go, it's a really hard concept for many people, myself included. And this idea of resistance, there's a certain level of trust that you have to have in something that's bigger than yourself. Yeah. What are the things that ground you to remember that trust?
Yeah, grounding. I think that's very important for everyone. And when I think of grounding, and I think of really just being connected, like your mind, your body, your thoughts and emotions, they're in synchrony. And one of the things that helps me stay grounded, of course, is the practice of meditation. And I know meditation is a big umbrella term. There's many different styles and forms of it. But really, what I advocate about meditation is it's very simply when you have a thought, when you have a certain emotion. And the analogy I give for that is it's like a horse running through a field. For most people, when they see that thought or emotion come in, it's that horse is running across the field and the mind is programmed to automatically get on that horse and that horse will take you for a ride. And we are unconscious of not only where we're going, but being on that horse. So, what I find that really helps ground me and stay present while being able to do what I need to do is to understand where are my thoughts coming from? Where are my emotions coming from? Why am I feeling anxious? Why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling irritated? Oh, it's because of this horse, which stems from this experience from the past. Okay, instead of me getting on that horse and taking me for a ride that to a place where I don't want to go, let me just watch that horse. Let me just acknowledge it, accept it for what it is, and then move on and carry out what I need to do. So I think that's a really important practice for a lot of people. And meditation is just building that muscle of awareness. And for some people, it helps you, of course, there's many studies that have shown, helps you with focus, concentration, makes your brain age slower, which is great, and helps with so many other aspects of your metabolism and inflammation markers and just makes your body so much more healthy.
I've been thinking about this because one of our past guests was talking about the importance of really taking care of your health. And I'm thinking about all the benefits that you outlined regarding meditation. I know a lot of people want to do it because it's much more common now, and you're hearing that more people are doing, and especially leaders. And then at the same time, it could be really hard for people who are first starting. I'm curious if you have any advice for folks who may be interested in exploring this, but are having a really hard time. Because I know when I first started meditation, it was really hard to sit still. And oftentimes I would either fall asleep or I would get super fidgety. Like I would start noticing little aches and pains that I didn't realize that I had. What advice do you have for somebody who's just exploring or beginning their meditation practice?
Yeah, and I understand as a mom of kids, your mind is not just on yourself, and especially I relate parents still same like owning a business, you have so many other things outside of your control. So I think the practice of meditation is so helpful because of that in managing things that you can't control at times. And I think, I want to point out sort of a misconception, which a lot of people have for meditation is basically, if they meditate for 5 minutes a day, whether it's in silence or doing a guided meditation, those benefits don't just last for those 5 minutes. It carries throughout your day. It carries throughout the week, right? And it's just like working out, right? When you're working out to train a muscle, right? It's not just at that period of working out that you're getting the benefits, right? Your muscle is getting stronger and it's, going through hypertrophy and it's growing. But same thing for the practice of meditation. The idea behind it is that we want to make that part of our life. And same thing in the teachings of pranic healing in Master Choa, he made meditation very simple, very easy, but it's part of our life, right? Twin Hearts meditation. It's a meditation on compassion. And not only does that meditation help facilitate, again, different studies on the physiological benefits of doing Twin Hearts with your brain waves and certain psychological markers and things like that, but also opens us to be that compassion, to be that person that has an open, kind heart and helping other people as well. Because as we know, in order to receive, we give. And I find that meditation, the easiest way to approach that for someone starting off is literally just being aware of your breath, being aware of the present moment. It doesn't have to be something where you have to sit, where you have to meditate on silence, where you have to do this guided meditation. It's really simply just training your awareness and putting your awareness in a state that you prefer and not a state that you don't prefer. And that's the simplest way I can put it. And when you put that into practice in 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, you can carry that throughout the rest of your day with your business, with your kids, with other things you have to do. And again, kind of compounds from there.
The power of self-awareness, I think, is huge. And as you were talking about how you incorporate, there's something around this, the simplicity. We don't have to make these strategies hard. We can incorporate it. But the one thing that I received from you too is if you do this, you are showing up more clear. And I was even more creative in the way that you show up and decide things, in the way that you maybe interact with people as well. So there's a lot of benefits to it. I also wanted to ask a question regarding something that you had brought up earlier. And you are a clinician, and for some people who are maybe hearing energy medicine or pranic healing, as you said, it's a little woo. But I love how you referenced on several occasions. One of the things around pranic healing and Master Choa is the science behind it, and there's a lot of research. So talk to me a little bit about some of these projects that you are doing right now to make energy medicine more tangible to people that may have not been exposed to this.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And that literally goes back to my passion in my work, Noilyn, is I think what's exciting about that question is it makes the unknown known, right? How can we talk about something like energy or meditation, which is so ethereal in concept and form, and make it tangible and practical for people? And this is where the science and research comes in. And when we talk about energy medicine, right, the proper word for it is biofield therapies in science. So bio means life, field means this invisible field of energy and information about your physical and psychological health. And what's very cool about this is the energy medicine, although it's probably more popular today than ever, is really a concept and form that spans thousands and thousands of years. Back then, in these ancient healing traditions, they understood that your thoughts, your emotions carry energy, right? That nature, running water, being next to trees, carries healthier, stronger energy than being in a place that is just full of concrete and sand. So there's a certain life force that carries our body beyond blood tests and other markers that we're so accustomed to. So really my passion in talking about it in a grounded, evidence-based way is to help people understand that these things do have evidence to them, but these practices have carried civilizations and thousands to millions of people for so many years. And so I would tell people, don't be so quick to judge something unless you try it. And that's what, Master Choa would say. It's like, even though I'm teaching you something, come to your own conclusion, try it out. And that's what I'm preaching the same as well, and just providing some background information to that.
Yeah, you said something, and I just had an aha about it's actually a form of reconnection to ourselves, to who we were, right? And I'm thinking about just our ancestors. You and I both come from communities that have long tradition of different types of healing practices that are connected to nature. That in many ways it's a remembrance of that maybe we had forgotten, and it helps to connect it. So it may not as foreign as some people think. Like this idea that we are connected to something that is greater to energy, that we are giving off energy, that all of us are working in harmony together. And just to understand, you said, we know intuitively when we go to a certain space, we either feel very welcome and warm, or like if you walk into a space, I have the EVGBs. There's something weird about this space, but we can't explain it, but we feel it. So we know that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what people would call like the vibes, right? The energy of the space, or the people or the group that you're with. And it's, yeah, I mean, people can feel it. And even though they might not feel it as the sensitivity that you and I do, and there are different cues and signs that are out there. And it's, again, we are just kind of swimming in this sea of energy, and it's whether using your discernment in the space and place and type of energy that you prefer, or things that you don't prefer, but you're unconscious of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking is how do you tap into that innate ability?
Yeah. Well, I always go back to it's a very cliche saying, but it goes back to our meditation called Twin Hearts meditation, which is speaking of meditation, the staple meditation that we do in pranic healing. So there's something in science called heart-brain coherence, right? So basically how the brain has electrical activity, same thing, the heart has electrical activity too, right? That's what makes it function physiologically. So how you can tap into this space in awareness and be very clear on just feeling energy, whether you know or not, whether it's a vibe or a sense of a feeling or emotion. When you can synchronize your heartbeat, your heart rate variability, as they call it, to your brain waves, that is when you're in a state of flow, like we're talking about. And when we meditate, meditation is one of the tools that helps synchronizes your heart and your brain. So when that happens, again, it's almost as if your life is happening to you, but you don't have to work as hard, right? You have these projects, you have these tasks, but you're doing it in a way where there's no resistance, right? It's almost effortless, but somehow you're getting the work done. And so much of the time we're so accustomed to like working hard and struggling, and right, great results only happen if I put, X amount of effort, which is true, but there's another definition which you can follow is being in a state of flow. And why I advocate this to my patients is that, sometimes people want to heal, but they might not want to heal for the right reasons. And really, it comes back to that space of authenticity, synchronizing your heart and your brain, doing what you love, and using your thoughts to help with that clear picture for us.
That's such a beautiful way to explain it. And I'm thinking about the folks that I work with, which are nonprofit leaders or individuals who own businesses, they're social impact businesses. And you're so right. A lot of times we feel like we have to give more, and we have to work hard for this thing to work. And when we're in a state of flow, it almost feels that we feel guilty. It shouldn't be this easy, but it can be, which I'm getting from how you're talking about. If we can get into that flow state, the work that we can do could be more joyful. It could even be more efficient in a lot of ways. And I'm thinking about the creativity piece. When you're in a state of flow, it's like all of these ideas are just coming, as opposed to when you're stuck.
Yeah.
It's just so much harder to do the thing.
Yes. And how I can kind of describe it on the creativity piece, the brain can only imagine so much based on its prior experiences and conditioning. But when you're in that flow state, as we say, it's almost as if everything opens up So things beyond your imagination comes in, and that's what we call intuition, right? So, and again, especially for business owners, especially people that own or are entrepreneurs in the path of social well-being and other things, it's really important to understand that you want to make sure you come from a space that you are in a state of creating and producing rather than a state of consuming and taking in. And how I describe this is also because a lot of us are empaths without realizing that we're taking on other people's energy. So when you're in a flow state, not only are you in a higher state where you can do work on a much more efficient and effective manner, but you're not taking in, again, that stress, that burden of other people's emotions and what they think of you and all that. It all works itself out. And that's why I find meditation, and especially Twin Hearts meditation, to be so powerful because, again, we're synchronizing the electrical activity of the heart with the brain. And physiologically, that produces its own sort of textbooks of results as well. But on a present awareness state, it has so much benefits, like we mentioned.
Yeah. And this level of clarity that you have, it's interesting that you bring up that you'll be able to be more self-aware so you're not hearing this outside noise. Because oftentimes that's what prevents us from dreaming bigger, is that outside influence, that outside energy, that outside noise. And if you can be clear and be really self-aware and know who you are, the more that you can materialize your dreams in many ways and also have bigger.
Yeah. And it's very simple, and it always go back to, like you're saying, with the concept of clarity, it all comes back to energy. And when we talk about really anything, whether it's the human body or your business, you look at two things: your resistance and your receptivity, which is receptivity is all about bringing energy in, right? The bottleneck to that is resistance, and resistance can come from ourselves, can come from the environment, whatever. Okay, so that's receptivity. You're bringing energy in. Once you have that energy, once you have that idea or intuition or whatever, the next part is conductivity, which means how do you use that energy? How do you apply it, right? So when you're in a flow state, what you're mentioning about clarity and being able to do things that are much more creative and much more efficient and effective, especially for business owners, I always like to look at this framework of receptivity. Are you able, with the information, with the energy that is coming in, are you able to take in 100% of it? If you are you able then to translate 100% of that energy into what you're trying to create, what you're trying to produce,
Yes.
right? Which is the action part. So when I think about my own practice, that's where I look at it. It's like, okay, where's the bottlenecks here? Where's the bottlenecks here? And when you can identify those bottlenecks, whether it's meditation or just looking at, the accounting of things, the finances, you can really apply this framework and principle to that area. And again, it's all energy.
You're so right. Like this metaphor of the bottleneck is just so perfect. Where is the bottleneck? Where do you need to untie that hose? Because once you untie it, the flow is easier. And it just keeps going. You're really making me think and reframe the way that we can understand this flow state. Because I also hear flow state in a lot of spaces that I'm in, but not necessarily from a place of energy and the impact that it has on your ability to create this world that you envision, right? The social impact that you want to have, but looking at from that place is understanding what the bottleneck is and removing that bottleneck and being clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, these concepts, Noilyn, is really, it's thousands of years old, and to help people understand, like in acupuncture, we talk about this all the time, right? We talk about the flow state of your energy meridians, and when you have bottlenecks or what we call stagnation, that's where disease happens, right? Disease happens not because of something, you can look at it physiologically, like, hey, you have this pathology, you have something that's not supposed to be there. But when you look at it on a simple energetic level, it's basically you have stagnation, you have traffic on your energy highways, and it's being built up. And because it hasn't been addressed over time, that's where it's going to create a problem. I think that's such an easy analogy for everyone to understand is when you look at whether it's your health, whether it's your business, energy or health in acupuncture is defined as free flow of this qi without obstruction. And when things are flowing without obstruction, like I said, when you're in that flow state, things just magically happen.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens. Exactly. I'm also interested in hearing about what you're curious about these days, because you are exploring so many things, either through the podcast or some of the research that you're doing. What has been piquing your interest?
Yeah, what has been piquing my interest? Well, I can say for sure I am a practical person. I always try to, whatever I learn, I try to apply it in my life and see if it works for myself. So what I mean by that is we understand that, at least I subscribe to the fact that we're spiritual beings living a human experience, right? And we have all these tools. And especially with energy medicine, it's a tool for not only health, right? But it's a tool for, like you said, kind of creating the reality or life that you want. And basically how I am looking at that now is I'm speaking about like bottlenecks and what I call like limiting thought forms and beliefs. Like everyone says, whatever you want, if you can think of it in your head, if you can visualize it, it's already happened, right? Because it's all energy and we're vibrational, energetic beings. So part of my little experiment is literally how much of my ceiling can I break and get a little bit bigger and push a little bit farther. And so I'm pushing myself in trying to break some of these limiting belief systems that I've been conditioned to have, whether it's with finances, relationships, work, travel. And every time I practice the teachings from pranic healing, it's like, oh, wow, that was so much easier than I thought. And speaking about inner resistance, it's usually the person doing the practice that is the limiting factor. And I find that when I take away myself, but not literally myself, but when I take away myself, I magically seem to shift into this new reality, this new energetic state. And to kind of sum that up, basically, what I'm trying to say is your external circumstances don't really matter. Your inner state of being matters, because your inner state of being is what attracts the reality that will come. Nothing has to be perfect right now, but as long as you're working on yourself and the energy of your thoughts and emotions and what you're creating, things will naturally come to you.
And how powerful our thoughts are, and why we need to cultivate practices like this. You also said something else that is really landing on me as well, is it's okay to experiment and to just push the limit a little bit, right? Sometimes when we think about transformation, we think it has to be this grand gesture of something. But sometimes it is in that, I'm just going to push it a little bit past this boundary, and I want to see. That's how we're able to change, and that's how we're able to shift. It's often in those little micro actions, those little micro moments of what's possible. Yeah. I am also curious about inspiration. What is inspiring you these days?
Yeah, I feel like the inspiration is life, right? As you know, with kids, you see time fly just through witnessing their day-to-day activities. I'm sure, especially for myself, when I look at myself and I see like, oh man, I feel like time is flying and I don't remember what I did yesterday, but I feel like I'm still growing. I feel like I'm still making progress. I think what inspires me is really when we see change happen physically, it's very easy to see, right? Whether it's your kids growing up, whether it's certain numbers that are coming into your business, when you're seeing certain family or relationships or traveling, making memories, that's very easy to see. And of course, that is very inspiring, and that's what most people tend to attach their inspiration to. I think going back to what I said about the inner state of being, how I am learning to become more inspired is to look at how I respond from my inner state of being. Speaking of those micro adjustments, right? This path, this life is sometimes long and challenging. Of course, it requires patience in terms of certain situations that don't change overnight. But with that being said, I'm starting to appreciate more how I respond differently from the inner state of being. And me taking notice of how, okay, I've done that. I spoke to this person a little bit differently, in a little bit better way, with more kindness, compassion, patience than I would have done a month ago. And then really just, acknowledging that and seeing that, okay, I've been improving despite things still looking like maybe a little bit of mess here and there. But I understand that my inner state of being is what attracts my reality, and that's where I'm creating from. So I think that's been my inspiration these past
Yeah.
couple months.
Thank you for raising that, because oftentimes when we're working to change our situation or change something within ourselves, we feel like we're actually not there. But you had said something about just taking stock. I'm in a situation again, but I responded differently. And how important that is for us in general, just to do that, because oftentimes the goal seems like it's so far out there and it doesn't feel like we're moving. And as you said, like with a child, you physically see them getting bigger, so you know transformation is happening. Or with numbers, you see a number changing, instead of going up or going down. But when it comes to something that we're trying to change within ourselves, it's harder to measure unless we are intentional in taking a step back and looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because it's so incremental, I find that a lot of people revert back to their old default self because it's like, I only made like 1 foot of progress. Let me just come back to the original starting line because that feels more comfortable. But when you notice you made like that extra step forward, even if it's 1 foot, that's your new baseline, right? And then you just kind of keep working up from there.
So, Lisa, what did you tell yourself so you don't get stuck in that, oh, I haven't done that much, and to recenter yourself and to acknowledge what are the things that you tell yourself so that you can keep.
Yeah, and I think you can resonate with this, Noilyn, as a business owner. There's so many unknowns, right? And you are the captain leading the ship. And I think that what helps bring me back to that center is always remembering back, okay, what is the destination? Like where is the goal? What is the one thing that I'm focused on? And what is the one thing that I need to do now that will just move me 1 foot closer to that finish line? And I know that a lot of people say this, but it's really true. If you can focus on just those one small steps on each moment, because every moment is a moment, it's an opportunity to think, feel, and make an action. If you can focus on just that one thing, that's what helps, again, grounds me and recenters me. But, above all, you need to have a vision for yourself. And, with any business, ideally, you would have a vision of where you want to go in an X amount of time. So, yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah, the power of now and the power of just one thing. I think it's a full circle back to our conversation earlier around it's simple. Just make it simple. And that's how you can keep moving forward. So we have a couple more questions. How can folks get connected to you, and if there's any other projects that you have that's coming up?
Sure. Yeah. So how folks can get connected with me is they can find me on social media. It's just my name, Dr. Jason Yuan, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And that's also the name of my website, which is jasonyuan.com. And some of the projects that I've been working on now is really looking at the science of energy medicine and biofield therapies and making it in a way that's easy to understand for people and helping them, again, ground back to the evidence or the outcomes of what these modalities have done and just inspiring them to try for themselves and help them come to their own conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So my last question, to take it back to the name of this podcast, which is Unlock Your Inner Creator. Jason, what does being a creator?
Yeah, I think it's being a creator is just living life, right? Life is the journey, not the destination. And I think that every moment, even talking to you now, Noilyn, is a moment to be really grateful for. Because I'm speaking and feeling and being myself in this present moment and talking to someone that is another like-minded soul that is on the path of trying to make this world a better place. And I think that's what being a creator means, is really acting on your highest passion and excitement, in every opportunity, and taking that one step, like we said, to move forward towards your next highest passion and excitement. And I try to remember that as best as I can, every minute to minute, day to day, week to week, month to month. And yeah, I think that's what really being a creator in this life is.
Yeah, beautiful. Taking minute by minute, step by step towards our highest self. Oh my goodness. Jason, I'm so glad that we did this. I feel like I'm returning the favor because I was also on your podcast. I got to know you a bit more. And thank you also so much for really talking about the benefits of meditation and energy healing and how everyday folks can just incorporate this and what the impact of it can be in their lives and just doing it in a very, very simple way. Thank you for being here.
Yes, I mean, thank you so much, Noilyn. I feel like because I asked you first to come on my podcast, it's a nice, as they say, energy exchange because it's so fun to talk about this rather than being a host because I feel like I'm more in my element and I don't have to worry about as many things. And it's been a really exciting conversation. And I've honestly learned so much about you and yourself and your work as well. So I'm so appreciative because I think the work that you're doing has so much meaning and impact. So I'm so grateful to know you as a friend and a colleague at this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Well, with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in. We will have many more creators in the coming weeks. Until then, take care. Thanks for listening to this episode on the Unlock Your Inner Creator podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to help support this interview series, please make sure to subscribe and tune in to the next episode and share it with others. And remember, dream big, dream bold, and take brave steps. I'll see you next time.